9:39 says, Then Peter arose and went with them. When he was come, they brought him unto the upper chamber, and all the widows stood by him weeping, and showing the coats and garments which Dorcas made while she was with them. Dorcas sewed. She used a needle. She used a needle for God. And after she died, they stood around her, and they stood around her burial place and so forth, and showed coats and garments she had left. What are you going to leave? What are they going to talk about when you go on to heaven? What are they going to stand around and talk about? What's it going to be? I wonder what your needle is, and you don't even know it's your needle. You have no idea you even have a needle. And if you do have a needle, you haven't developed it. Now, I don't want you to hurt yourself on it or anything like that. You don't get it too sharp there. But this is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're going to be known for, is whatever our needle is. I believe my needle is talking. I can't do anything else, but I sure can talk. So I need to talk for the Lord. And I need to be not feeling bad about the fact that I talk a lot. In fact, I've got speakerphones. The Lord's given me some good friends who have gotten me speakerphones so that if I can't, sometimes my hands are not good. It has nothing to do with the degenerative disc disease. Have I told you about my operations? It's other problems. The other brightest brothers are in my hands. And so I have a speakerphone so that if I can listen to somebody and talk with them and help them, then I can. If you can talk, do everything, keep everything around you going that you can so that you can talk. And I don't mean just here. There's many, many months I'm not out on meetings or anything like that. I'm just sitting home, just barely doing anything sometimes. But if I can talk, then I need to talk, because that's the needle that God has given me. I can't do anything much with my hands, never have been able to before I ever had problems with my hands. Or at least it was never developed in my life. I never was, my mother gave me some little quilt blocks to make a little quilt, dog quilt when I was a little kid. And I was about 4 years old, and I remember just almost screaming and hollering. It drove me nuts. Other people, I ask them, what do you do when you're nervous? And they say, sew. You know, so we're all so different in what we can do. And I'm so thrilled that God does use us, though, to do something. On July 29, 1993, my Sunday school teacher that meant so much to me, Mrs. Olin Holbrook, became absent from the body and present with the Lord at 90-some years of age. That was one of her pastor, who was Dr. Lee Robertson, and he was my pastor too, when I got to know her. That was one of his most quoted Bible verses, absent from the body, present with the Lord. It makes death seem so wonderful, doesn't it? And so the sting is sure out of it. We're absent from the body, present with the Lord. And he used it constantly when referring to saved people who were called dead. Because she was 92 years of age, had been very ill for many months, and had lived away from her hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee for 22 years, I didn't know what to expect as to the visitation hours in Chattanooga and the graveside service, whether her girls would show up or not, but they did. They came around where she had passed away, and they started talking about what she had meant in their lives. I can't tell you what she meant in my life. I still have to fight gossip, griping, and all that stuff. I always will have to fight it, but I was really bad at it. I wasn't even fighting it when I met her. I didn't even know to fight it. I just thought, put it all out there where it is and tell it like it is and be proud of it, that you say it just like it is, you know. If you don't think somebody's doing right, tell them you're not doing right, you know, and just out with it. And she started talking to me and working with me, and when I'd call her on the phone, she used her gift of talk and her gift of Bible study. Her Bible would be right out by the telephone, and probably when I was in my 20s and got to know her, and I was acting like this, she was probably in her late 50s, I can't remember, something like that. And she'd been a widow for 14 years. And but she did what she'd always say, I'm not alone, and she wasn't. She was reading the Word of God, and she had that Bible out there ready for when her girls called her. And when we'd call her, she'd give us scripture, and she'd tell us why we shouldn't be talking the way we were about each other, and that type of thing. And I got so much from her, and so many of her girls who are now in their 50s and 60s were there for her service at the graveside, and stood around and said, Mrs. Holbrook did this for me. She did that for me. Do you remember when she did this? Do you remember what she did that? I'm going to stand here and kid you. I hope some people will do that when I go on to heaven. I don't want people to just, I don't want, you know, people say, well, don't shed any tears. I wouldn't care if my sister would throw herself across my casket just for a little while, and then get a hold of herself, you know. These people who act like, you know, I don't want to show any tears or anything, but honey, cry a little bit at least, you know. many years, because you know how many times you say, well, it's been years since she was there, so she hasn't done anything for me recently, so we forget her. But girls from that class, her girls, came from a long, long ways away in some cases, and they were there. And I watched the different ones. Lois Tomlin had been in Highland Park Baptist Church. And I told, and the group of us got together after the service. We got together, and we hadn't been together for years, from that Sunday school class. And we talked and celebrated the life of Mrs. Holbrook. And I watched Lois Tomlin, one of the girls, one of Mrs. Holbrook's girls. And Lois was just having a good time, you know, but she was alone, and she'd been alone all the years I ever knew her. And I said, I thought of something. I thought of when I'd gone down to Pinellas Park Baptist Church, and someone had taken me on 3 hours down to Naples, Florida, where Mrs. Holbrook was living with her second husband that she'd married on her 70th birthday, and they almost had their 25th anniversary. And I'd gone down there and had seen her a year ago, January, before she passed away this last July. And Mrs. Holbrook was saying, look at my wedding pictures from that 70th birthday, on her 70th birthday when she married. Look at my pictures. And Lois Tomlin's the one that took them. And I said, Lois, I saw the wedding pictures. She said, you mean after 22 years? Do you mean after 22 years she was still enjoying the pictures I took? I said, yeah, Lois. And Lois had tears in her eyes, and I thought, that's her needle. People, we all need a needle. We all need to use whatever our needle is and know that it's needed. And you know, instead of Lois saying, well, why don't you all take pictures? She always had a camera ready and saw to it that she saved money and had her roll of film in it. You know, in fact, she made us all disgusted sometimes. She took so many pictures of us. You know, and we had to pose this way and that way, you know, but you know, now we're all loving those pictures. You know, instead of saying, why don't y'all keep pictures? Why don't you, if you're a photographer, why don't you keep your camera at the ready and maybe take pictures of families? And take pictures of families. And you know, sometimes if a kid will look back and see pictures of him as he was growing up, he sees times that you put time on him that he doesn't remember. When my kids were home from Papua New Guinea and they were out on the deputation trail, my daughter called me one time and said, Mom, we're at St. Louis, and this is happening, and that's happening, we've had a breakdown, and you know all that happens. And she said, I don't know, the kids, we don't have a home in the United States, and she was having one of those times, you know, that we all have. And, you know, I was trying to be the brave mama, and I said, honey, go get one of those disposable cameras. You take those, if you're in St. Louis, you take them up in the arch. And even if they don't like going up in the arch, take pictures of them up in the arch so you can show them to them years from now and show how much you all got to do together as a family because of the fact that they didn't have a home someplace where both mom and dad were away at work and all that type of thing. You know, we need people who can take pictures, who will just, it could help a family, and they would just take pictures. Is that a needle that you have? And people would stand around and say, she took my picture at a certain place. Then I looked around and there was a lady sitting there who had been an honorary class member at Highland Park Baptist Church in our Sunday school class. And she's in her 80s, Mrs. M.J. Parker. And Mrs. Parker is sitting sick today in Chattanooga, Tennessee in her late 80s, middle 80s, somewhere in there. But she used to run the dining hall at Tennessee Temple College for Dr. Lee Robertson. Dr. Robertson found out that she could cook really well. He felt that a school ought to have good food. He thought that if a school had good food and if the kids had good dorms, that they would feel better and do more, and stay at school better and do more of what they were supposed to do. And he wanted Mrs. M.J. Parker, just a woman in the church. She wasn't trained to do this, to come in and because she was a good cook and cook for in the dining hall at Tennessee Temple. And Annie Ruth McGuire, who had opened her home for us to have this little event, said, Mom Parker, we called her Mom Parker, tell Marlene what that kid from Temple called and asked you the other day. And Miss Parker said, what? You know how we act. You know, what do you mean? No, you know, she didn't remember, you know. And Annie Ruth said, you know, the one where his wife is dying of cancer. And she, oh, that, you know. And you know, that's all she had thought about ever since she got the call, you know, because she's feeling like she's not used to God. She feels like nobody remembers anything she did, and she's sick, and she can't go to church, you know, and she just barely got to this meeting. Someone saw to it that she got there, and she just about fell off the porch because her equilibrium was off, you know, and I thought, oh my, this woman is going to kill herself coming to this event, you know, and she just feels like she's not really remembered. And She said, oh, well, this man just called who used to be a Tennessee Temple student, and he said that his wife is on chemotherapy and she can't eat anything, but she wants some of Mom's fried chicken. And he said, I'm telling you, Miss Parker, if you'll stay on the line with me, people, this is where it's at. Really, what can you do? Can you fry chicken? Can you take pictures? You know, what is it you haven't developed and you're not using to use to change lives for God, to be a life changer, to be a person who can really see lives change? These personal little things like this. And the man said, if you'll stay on the line with me, Mom, he said, first, is this the Parker who used to be at the dining hall? And she said, yes, it is. And he said, she just wants some of your fried chicken. He said, I'll try to cook it for her if you'll stay on the line and tell me what to do. And I thought, wow, you know, what a husband, you know, that would do that for a sick wife. You know, in the first place, instead of just saying, well, too bad, you know, I can't get it, you know. He found a way to get it. And then what he did for Mom Parker, he doesn't even know. Because she needed to be needed. She needed to be remembered. She needed, and so that was her needle. Her frying pan was her needle. What is your needle? It may not be that you make coats or garments for people, but what do you do for people? Well, yes, we're to lead them to the Lord, and that's the most important thing of all. If they're not going to heaven, you know, all we're doing for them is just helping them through this world and letting them go to hell. But to see their lives change, a lot of times if you just did a little something, took a picture and brought it to them, and said, I took this picture, thought you might want it. You know, maybe they have a special event happen, they don't happen to have a camera around. Or you just fried some chicken and took it over. You know, or Mrs. Trieber, when you made that crock pot full of stuff. Let's see, there were potatoes and carrots and roast beef, and then how was the corn? Was it in the crock pot? Or was it corn on the cob or separate or what? Your daughter cooked the corn and it was just in a pan and you would heat that up. You know, now, if she had just left another crock pot for them to take to somebody, I'm sure she didn't do it. No, she didn't do it. I didn't even leave a crock pot for my husband, let alone somebody else. I knew he was going to say that when he started. I knew he was going to say, yeah, that was because, didn't you know he was going to say, because she left it, you know. But, you know, just, you know, if it's cooking, just an extra little something that you send to somebody, and it'll change, it can change lives. You can use a frying pan to be used to God to change lives. People really believe your love when you show it. They really, you know, we can say I love you as much as we want, but a pan of corn, or do you know what, when someone's bereaved, you know, sometimes just fixing a good old dish of mashed potatoes with some butter on top, and taking it over. You know, sometimes we get about all the cake we need at a funeral. You know, we want to fix the big fancy cakes or go buy the big fancy cakes, but you know, just make a nice little extra bunch of mashed potatoes. Sometimes that's all you put down you, is a little bit of mashed potatoes. Or sometimes if you took some popcorn over to somebody. Sometimes a person alone, you know, and they're not wanting to get up and even fix some popcorn. You say, well, you just throw it in the microwave. I'm talking about the kind you do yourself, you know. Shake it yourself, you know, and and take a little bit more. You don't even have to have money. All it says is I'm reaching out to you. And by the way, when you reach out with food, put it in tin foil so we won't have to send it back. I get so mixed up when I'm sick and I can't figure out how to even thank that to the people. You know, and bring us a thank you card that already has your name and address on it. Stamp, so that we won't feel guilty for not sending you a thank you. What's your needle? What is it? It can be so many different things. I told you about being in South Carolina or North Carolina at a meeting, and my daughter's sister died in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I wanted so badly to see her. And they called the hospital to see if I could come, and they said that I could, and but no one wanted to take me through the night. I said, when I leave, when this meeting is over on Saturday, can someone take me and get me back for me to teach in Sunday school class the next morning? Well, it was a lot bigger trip than I ever realized. It was through the night, all night long, all afternoon, all evening. We got there at 12 o'clock at night, and I saw the girl for 1 hour, and then got back in the car, and the next morning, it was really fun. Don't you just love to pull something on somebody? I was really bad at that time. Have I told you about my sickness? I was really bad at that time, last September. And so they'd gotten me a handicapped room and all that. It was right by the office You know, and here I came in at about 7 o'clock in the morning. They let me out in the office. People could all see me go in there. Here's this handicapped person, you know, been out all night, you know. And then in a little while, the preacher came to get me for breakfast. And I had time to bathe and get ready to go to church. And I went to breakfast. And, you know, one man and his wife, but the wife stayed in the van, brought me in about 7. And another man, his wife stayed in the car, came and got me. At about 8 o'clock, and I thought, boy, I am a swinging handicap. Okay? But I went, finally, these people, Steve and Cindy Davis, Cindy said, I'll take it, we'll take it, I'll call my husband. Her husband happened to be a man who saw to it that convoys got through. You know, he was a military man that saw that convoys got through fast, in the middle of the night. You know, so he knew just exactly. Now, he hadn't been saved very long, and there were cigarettes, and, you know, they got in the car, you know, and they said, we're sorry, we have our ciggies. I said, just so I don't have to smoke them. I know it's secondhand, but, you know, I gossip. You smoke, so let's go ahead. You know, I wasn't caring much whether they smoked or not. I was wanting this trip, and they had a beautiful fan, and I could lie down in the back, you know, and go to sleep while they spelled each other off through the night, you know, and they had they brought their contemporary Christian music, they brought their 2 big old glasses of water, and well, off we went through the night. They had a needle. They had a needle. It was knowing how to get people through to someplace and back with no problem at all. Everybody at the church acted like I was taking off for Alaska. You're going and you're coming back in the morning. You won't make it in the morning. You won't be able to teach Sunday school. You know, they had all time. These people said, no problem, let's go. Get our ciggies and we'll go. You know, They were people that had everybody. They don't have everything under control yet. They didn't. You know, they just been saved a little while. And they still got their ciggies. But then a lot of you have still got some of the things in your life too. Now, personally, I have nothing left yet to take care of. But you do. You know, they still have a needle. They still had a needle they could use. And I got up in the front at first, and I took down everything they said about their salvation story. I love to hear salvation stories. Isn't it great? I mean, and what God does, I mean, he must really love us all individually so very, very, very much. I feel like he went through so much to find me in Nebraska, where none of my cousins have gotten saved. None of the people I graduated have gotten saved. There's things I've done to try to remedy that situation, but so far I haven't seen it happen. And there are no churches still in my area in Nebraska, no churches that really teach the gospel that I know of in my area in Nebraska. And what God did to get me out of there and get me to a place to be saved is unbelievable. I just cannot believe it. And I love to hear salvation stories. So they were telling me they were all excited of they've not been saved that long. They were telling me all about it, and then we drove through the night. And they used their needle of knowing how to drive to get me there. And when they got me there, and I walked into that room, and Dee and her mother had been notified, her birth mother had been notified that she was sick but hadn't come. And I think she just wasn't able to face it. And her other sister, but enjoyed, was in New Guinea, and of course couldn't come. And when I walked in, and she called, I've always told her I couldn't be a mom to her, but when she was that sick, she said, she called me Mama. And I walked in, and she looked at me, and all tubes all running in and out, and the couple was standing at the door. And they told me later it was worth everything in the world to see that little girl be happy about somebody that came to see her all that ways through the night. And her husband, who was so much older and so forth, and was there, but I said, I can't believe you do that. I said, Dee, people do love you. And I could prove my love for her because someone used their needle. If someone hadn't used their needle, I wouldn't have been able to prove my love for her. And she did need me to prove it. She did need to know that I cared about her. And so that needle was used. I was talking to an Oriental woman, or to a group like this, and an Oriental woman said her needle was her walk. And I thought, maybe she's got a cute little walk. But it wasn't that at all. It was W-O-K. You know, and she used her walk, you know, for the Lord. And that's what people remembered her by. She did things for them, you know, because of her walk, you know. And I remember a woman when I was a little girl. I remember a woman coming over when I had 2 younger sisters, one 7 years younger and one 11 years younger. My mother had polio when she was 3, and she walked like this, and she had one leg just about like that. And I was always older for my age, and I was able to do things that some of the other kids my age wasn't able to do. I was strong, and I was able to do a lot of things for my sisters, and I don't think I was ever put up on too much because my dad came home from a flour mill job at night, and he did the washing and the heavy work and all when my mother would be sick, and she was sick a lot. And he would do all the very heavy work. He wouldn't have me doing any of that for anything. But there was a neighbor lady across the park that evidently watched me doing a little more than maybe other kids did. Boy, it meant so much to me. When she came to me one day in September and said, there's a fair at Lincoln, Nebraska, and I've asked you folks if you can go with our family. You helped your mother awful much this summer. And I saw how you helped your mother, and I want to take you to the Nebraska State Fair. And your folks have said I can, and I could, and I have a little gold bracelet for you. And the little gold bracelet, now that I think of it and know about it, it was just probably a dime store bauble. But you know what? It was prettier than any gold bracelet that was real gold that I've ever had in my life. Because it was some woman was watching and she noticed that I'd worked hard. And maybe you have that needle of observation, and you let somebody know that you see what they're doing and that you care what they're doing. When no one else is watching and nobody else seems to know anything about it but you. And her name was Oma Rutherford. And she went, she wasn't a friend for life or anything like that, but I remember her name because of the little gold bracelet. Could you give a little gold bracelet to people? Could that be your needle? Just having the little gold bracelets ready. You know, some little kids need some gold bracelets from you. They need you giving them a little gold bracelet. It may not, I may be using that figuratively. It might be something else. But could you get some things together just to give them out to some people who are trying to do right, trying to do well? I was never, like I told you, good with my hands. And I went to a school right across from our house to the first grade. It was a 2-room school in Nebraska. There's still a lot of 1-room schoolhouses in Nebraska. It's the state that has the most 1-room schoolhouses left of any state in the United States. That's good. But anyway, we've got to be known for something. Anyway, I was going to the 2nd grade, and I went to the big school, 8 blocks up a hill, and it looked so big to me in the 2nd grade because I just gone across the park to go to school before. And I had not learned to tie my shoes yet. I'm sure I must have been terribly embarrassed about it. I mean, here I was a big girl going to 2nd grade and couldn't tie my shoes. I remember as well as if it were yesterday, getting about a block away from the 1st grade school. See, I'd always gotten help from my 1st grade teacher or my mom. I could just go across the park home to have her help me with things like tying my shoes and all that. And so I got about a block up, and my shoe came untied, and I thought I'll go back home to have my mom tie my shoe. And I got almost home, and Mrs. Schaff, who I haven't seen for 50-some years, and I don't even know if she's still alive or anything like that. I believe she moved to California from Nebraska when so many came out here from Nebraska to get work during the Second World War. But I remember her name. And I remember her name because she had a needle. She had kindness. As I was walking home, she said something like this. I can't believe I can still remember everything, but this is the way I remember it. She said, Marlene, why are you going home? And I said, my shoe's untied. And she said, don't go plumb home. That's the first time I remember plumb used that way. You know, and I remember her saying, don't go plumb home, which is the house next door. She said, here, and had me put my foot up, and she tied my shoe. And as I remember it, she didn't say, a great big girl like you, and you don't know how to tie your shoe yet. Nor did she say, my little girls knew how to tie their shoes when they were 4 or 5 years old. You know, she's just nice to me. You know, just maybe your needle is just being nice to kids that don't know how to tie their shoes. You know, I'm just using that story. It might be something completely different from tying shoes. But I don't care if they're in the 4th or 5th grade, they don't know certain things. They still need you to be nice to them, especially need you to be nice to them. Especially need you to be kind to them. Because they probably already have gotten a lot of guff from other people, and they just need you to believe in them. And believe that someday maybe you will be worth something. What's your needle? What is it that you could do? Now, some of you know what your needle is. You know you're doing some things already for other people. It's cooking or it's this. But I wonder what is a needle that could be developed after this meeting that you've really never developed as far as using it for God. You've never thought of it. You've never even thought of it as being something that you could use for God. People, there is not a legitimate talent. There is not a legitimate gift. There is not a legitimate ability that can't be used for God. I've been shocked and surprised at some of the things that have happened in my life that have turned out to be used for God. My dad had a 4-lane bowling lane. When he got out of that flour mill, when the Second World War was over, his brother came home from the war and asked my dad to go into having a little restaurant in Nebraska, little small hometown restaurant. And I was a waitress there for many years. And then they had a 4-lane bowling alley along with the restaurant. And my mom thought it'd be terrible for me to be around the bowling lane, and you know, sometimes thinking they're not so good to be around. And but it seemed like I got quite a bit out of it. Folks, years later, our college got a 6-lane bowling lane, and it was put under a department that I worked with. So when the guys came to me that were working with the bowling lanes and said they this, that, and the other, I'd say, well, let's oil them down. I sounded so knowledgeable. Never did I get taught in a Christian college how to take care of bowling lanes. If it's legitimate at all, you'll use it. Whatever it is that you've done, you'll use it in life. I mean, just be thankful for everything that's good that you have learned in your life. But what is it that could be developed that you've never thought? Not the obvious thing that you already do. What is, maybe you write. Maybe you can write those cards like Jane Grafton's got in her purse. I told in the full-time Christian workers meeting, I said they don't even have flowers on them. She just goes to the post office and gets these old plain ones, 19 cents, and people still like them. You know, maybe it's write a card. Maybe I don't know what it is. I don't know what it'll be for you. But what is it that you have not developed for God's work? I'd like somebody to stand up and tell me